Tell Us About Yourself is sponsored by bonusround.ca, streaming Canada's classic game shows on demand. Dive into the golden age of television with thousands of episodes of Canadian series that defined an era from anywhere in the world, all for just $1.99 a month. From iconic shows like Let's Make a Deal and Definition to cult classics like Bumper Stumpers and The Mad Dash, bonusround.ca brings you timeless entertainment that's fun, enlightening, and affordable. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, relive the magic of Canadian television history. Subscribe now at bonusround.ca for $1.99 and turn every night into Game Show Night. By Game Show Forensics. Join host Robert McKee and his crack team of forensic game show scientists as they take you on the deepest dives imaginable in a quest to analyze the most detailed minutiae of game shows nobody else dares to, or cares to, investigate. Nothing is too whimsical for examination, no semantics too absurd for the research extremists at GameShowForensics.com. Parental discretion is advised. And by The Inn at Leola Village. Nestled in the heart of picturesque Pennsylvania, the Inn at Leola Village is a sanctuary of luxury and relaxation. Indulge in the timeless beauty of their historic suites, each meticulously designed to transport you to a bygone era of elegance and grace. Experience the culinary delights of their award-winning Italian restaurant, where every dish is a masterpiece crafted from the finest local ingredients. From romantic getaways to corporate retreats, the Inn at Leola Village offers a haven for every occasion. Unwind at the spa, stroll through the lush gardens, and let the stress of everyday life melt away. Make your reservation today at theinnatleolavillage.com or call the front desk at area code 717-656-7002. The Inn at Leola Village, an oasis of luxury. Tell Us About Yourself. Conversations with Game Show Contestants is produced in partnership with the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York, one of the largest history museums in the United States, and one of the leading museums serving families with highly interactive exhibits and programs. Since 1968, the Strong Museum has been dedicated to exploring the ways in which play encourages learning, creativity, and discovery, and how it illuminates cultural history. And their National Archives of Game Show History. Founded by industry veterans Bob Bowden and Howard Blumenthal, the archive is home to thousands of artifacts representing over 80 years of broadcasting, including props, set designs, video interviews with game show professionals, and other iconic elements from the history of television at play. For more information about the National Archives of Game Show History or the Strong National Museum of Play, visit museumofplay.org or call area code 585-263-2700.
Blue 35.
Tell us about yourself, would you?
Tell us something about you.
For any new viewers, won't you tell us again about yourself?
We've met before, but let's meet again. Tell us about
What
yourself.
else can you tell us about yourself?
Perhaps you'd fill us in again and tell us about yourself.
You've just seen a submarine lieutenant, with the help of his father, go all the way.
You're a millionaire!
But it's not over yet. Wednesday, he's back, going for the biggest cash prize in game show history. He could even break the bank. See if it happens. 21, NBC Wednesday at 8, 7 Central.
I'm Dave Legler. I live in Kansas City, Missouri. and I am a fractional leader for small businesses.
Dave, I usually start these conversations by finding out what role game shows played in the contestant's life before they became a contestant, because one of the commonalities among all the people that have been on the show, we're all game show contestants. And so we all made that jump from being a participant, or being a viewer rather, to being a participant. What did game shows mean to you, if anything, growing up?
Sure, yeah. Growing up, I watched a fair number of game shows, off days from school or um, during the summer, things, like um, the sale of the century and things like that. I wasn't a great fan of your Price is Right, which a lot of people I know love. I was more into the question and answer type ones. So um, the first one I remember watching religiously was Tic-Tac-Toe when Mr. Tom McKee, who I believe you've had on the show, and I've had the pleasure of meeting myself during some of my game show escapades, was going on his long tear in the late 70s. That was to this. I was probably 9 or 10 at the time. One of the neatest things I'd ever seen. Um, as I got a little bit older, in '84, the powers that be brought back Jeopardy, and my father had always been a big fan of the original run of Jeopardy, so he started watching those. And where I grew up, uh, the normal airtime for Jeopardy was 3:30 in the afternoon, just as I was getting home. So I started sitting down and watching with him. So that was a great family bonding time that he and I had as I was growing up.
So did your interest in question and answer shows inspire a love of trivia, or was that something that was present even before you started watching Jeopardy with your family?
Yeah, it's a good question. Um, as I've kind of traced these things back, uh, my best guess at where I started to develop that affinity for questions and answers was I was relatively young, and I spent a lot of time at uh, some relatives' house. My aunt, who's no longer with us, um, would watch me along with my cousins, and they tended to have more gadgets than we did, and they had something called 2XL that I remember sitting in their playroom playing with for sometimes hours on end. And 2XL was essentially this robot shaped 8-track tape player that had questions and answers in it. And, if you know anything about how an 8-track works, you plug it in and it has buttons to take you from track to track. So it would ask you a question and you would hit a button and it would take you to the track that told you whether you got the answer right. And I think my very young brain really enjoyed the dopamine hit that I would get from getting the questions right. And
Sure. I remember 2XL very well. I have the cassette version, but I understand it works the same way.
I now have the 2XL that I grew up playing. When my aunt passed, it was something that was passed on to me because I was really the only one who liked to play it. But a love of trivia was born.
I remember having a 2XL when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. This is like the early 90s. And at the same time, there was a game show on TV called Pick Your Brain. And the centerpiece of the show was a massive 2XL. He was like the co-host of the show. And I remember being fascinated that I had the small version of him at home and there was a large version on TV. That idea of having things at home that were that I could see on game shows that were sort of larger than life. Like I loved high rollers with the big dice and card sharks with big cards. I had always had that fascination with like large props, large set pieces.
Yeah, I don't remember that show. Sounds fascinating. I kind of went through a game show lull when I hit early adulthood. I continued to do trivia type things through high school, a little bit in college, my roommate and I and a couple of friends represented our university at the University of Kansas in Quiz Bowl for a couple of years. But beyond that, I kind of found other things for a good stretch of the mid to late 90s. And then, speaking of game shows, Regis and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire hit. And at first, I was like, well, these questions are pretty easy. But then I got hooked and I got into the mode of, dialing the phone number every night and trying my luck and then looking online to see who else had been doing it and what questions that they had gotten to kind of prepare myself for the next chance I would have. And when I look at that, Michael Davies kind of just hit the sweet spot because he made you a first round contestant in his game show from your living room every night by having the opportunity to dial in and potentially find yourself on the show in a matter of days. It was brilliant.
Oh, sure. And it took out the Hollywood aspect, I think, of the contestant selection process. You no longer had to have a TV-worthy story, or you didn't have to go through that quote-unquote audition process. If you were smart enough and knew how to play the game, you could get there. And I feel like that, to me, was a game changer in terms of the way they picked contestants for that show, because you found a lot of interesting people that wouldn't have necessarily made it through had this been a traditional LA or New York casting process the way they do for some other shows.
100% agree. It's folks like ourselves who are the dominant demographic sometimes have challenges getting on shows, and there are good points and bad points about that, but certainly the change from something that was very not quite scripted, but carefully chosen to something that anybody who managed to get through the hoops was a contestant was also very innovative for Mr. Davies and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Let's talk a little bit about being a trivia fan in an era before the things like online trivia leagues and things of that nature. Other than academic pursuits, other than Quiz Bowl or things like that, how did you sharpen your trivia skills? What activities, what games, what books, what did you use to maintain your interest in that pursuit?
Sure, right. I think most of mine was just biological. I didn't do a lot of studying for these kind of things. Even when I was competing in high school and college, it wasn't something that I went out of my way to study. I'd be happy to run through questions, but reading and obviously we didn't have the internet then, but looking at reference material and whatnot, I didn't keep up with the news. I didn't read newspapers. I watched and consumed a fair amount of pop culture, but in terms of preparing, it was mostly by playing, and then that largely continues to today. When Trivial Pursuit came out, at some point, I think I got tired of losing to my father, who was very good, and took to reading questions sometimes during my downtime, just to test my knowledge and learn things that way. But it was always about a competition of some sort, whether that competition was against anyone else or just my own trying to get 6 questions right on the same card, and then making that my goal of the day.
I'm fascinated with the way contestants used to prepare, again, before the internet, before things like the J Archive. I was having a conversation with a man named Robert McKee, who was on a show called Lingo on Game Show Network, and he talked about his fascination with trivia games and computer games and video games. And it was a whole sort of subgenre of video games that I don't know was very popular in the 90s. I think there were certainly things that were more popular, but he had that fascination with, with electronic versions of Jeopardy and the Quiz Whiz, which I think Tiger Electronics put out like in the 90s. And even I think that was a Coleco product like 2XL was. But that was something that I loved. And I would not consider myself a trivia professional or even like a hardcore trivia player by any means. I'm okay, but not great. But I used to love the idea of being able to carry games like that along with me, and books too, to a certain degree. The Trivial Pursuit cards, I think, were great for that.
Yeah, I never really got a whole lot into those video games. I had, spells here and there. But as you mentioned, video games, I did play a fair number, as a teenager. And what I found as I've continued to compete is I actually got a fair amount of things that I learned from the type of video games I would play. And I wasn't much for the shoot 'em ups. I would play the dialogue driven games, the role playing games. Um, one of my favorites was a game called Ultima that I started playing on their fourth edition and played all the way through their 10th. And there are just little nuggets of things that I learned that I didn't realize I was learning at the time that come up more than you think from games like that. Others that nobody's ever heard of, a game called Agent USA. In addition to being a fan of sports teams and learning geography from that way, it's a game where you're fighting this virus, for lack of a better term, and you're taking the train all over the country to fight it, and so you're learning where all these places are. And again, not realizing and not intending to learn things, I was learning things.
Sure. And I think it plays into what you had mentioned earlier, that biological sort of desire to learn and retain information. I mean, without, like you said, without even trying to learn things, you can just pick them up kind of on the side. I mean, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, I think, is probably one of the greatest examples of a game that you can play over and over again and learn so much as you play. Games are just such excellent tools for learning. And I mean, as somebody who loves school, I think that appealed to me as well. I always loved learning. I loved hanging out with people who loved learning. Did you have friends who loved trivia and facts and learning as much as you did, or were you sort of solo in that?
I think growing up, I was very much the outlier. And when I say biological there, not only is it something of a curated curiosity as I was growing up, I just had a sponge of a brain, and I was very lucky in that way, which has led me to many of the successes I've had in my life have been through the biological structure of my brain and the way it works. But, the ability to hear things and retain them, oftentimes verbatim, as a young person, went a long way. And then the ability to recall them very quickly went a long way. But as I think back, the folks I played Quiz Bowl with in high school, a few of them were good friends of mine, but they weren't necessarily into it the same way I was into it. They competed and they had fun with it, but I'm also biologically, or probably more through conditioning, driven to compete and win. And so I was doubling down on those kind of things in high school and largely carrying that team.
I always loved being the kind of kid back then who took things like that seriously, whether it was Quiz Bowl or spelling bees or anything of that nature. I always loved being the one to take it more seriously than the people around me who were more, like, I guess, like you're saying, more casually into it. I just feel like it's a more enriching experience when you take things like that seriously. I feel like in the scope of scholastic exploits, games can be seen as a sort of fun kind of side activity, but I think that they are so important. And again, just to take stuff like that so seriously, it just, to me, resulted in a more enriching and fun and memorable experience.
I tend to agree, but to an extent. There were certainly times throughout, particularly my younger life, even into young adulthood, where I probably took it too seriously and, let it affect my mood more than it should, and or had had reactions that were probably inappropriate to when things didn't go my way. And so, one of the things as I've matured, I've learned to rein that in. I still like to win, but it's okay if you don't always win. And I think that's a healthier balance that can be hard to grasp if you're very competitive as a younger person, but a good one to adopt as you mature.
That fiercely competitive nature, I feel like, is at near the top of the list, if not at the top of the list, of qualities that game show casting professionals look for when they're looking for contestants to play on their shows. Was there a point where you realized that this might be a skill that could carry you in that arena? Did you ever think of yourself as a potential game show contestant before Millionaire came about and it made the process so accessible?
Sure, I did. The My first foray into trying to be a contestant was as a college student, and they were having Jeopardy auditions for the college tournament at the Mall of America that year, and I was lucky enough to get a slot and drove in basically all night from Lawrence, Kansas to take the test on a early Saturday morning at the Mall of America. Didn't make the show, haven't made the show yet. Continue to try, but thought of myself as someone who might be able to do well at this kind of a thing. But then, life kind of got in the way for a while, so uh, found other interests. There was no such thing really as pub trivia in the U.S. at that point, and so there was not a great outlet for that type of a thing for a window in my 20s until Millionaire hit again, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm okay at this. Maybe we should try.
There were so many opportunities around that time because it felt like every network in the wake of the success of Millionaire had their $1 million show. I mean, there were so many. And in 2000, it's announced that NBC is bringing back 21, which is a revival of a rigged game show from the 50s. And they're going to do it on the up and up this time with millions of dollars at stake. How did you find out about the opportunity to appear on 21? How did that opportunity kind of manifest for you?
Sure. Not only did Millionaire lead to the revival of game shows and the evolution to the big money game shows, uh, because it led me to online forums where they were discussing um, the the phone in fasted finger questions. Someone posted in one of those forums, "Hey, NBC is going to have this new show in the beginning of the year, and they're going to be in Chicago this weekend looking for contestants. Here's the information on how to get hooked up with them and try out." So directly led to a phone call to 21. Um, a I believe they had us take a test over the phone, and then in-person auditions that weekend. And then the rest, it's a bit of a whirlwind. You go downtown to Chicago, they call you back. They actually brought contestants out to LA on their dime for final interviews with the casting team and the producers and those kind of things. Um, so they were taking it very seriously and were putting their best foot forward for this new revived genre.
Wow. Wow, they paid for the trip to California for the final section of the audition. That's very rare.
Yes. I don't see that happening these days. Not that it's necessary with the advent of Zoom and other similar avenues to have those kind of interactions. But yeah, they were very much into it. And I met several folks who I kept in contact with uh, around that time who went out there but never made it on the show, never even made it to the final cut. So they they were putting their money where their mouth was, not only on the prize money, but on their expenses.
Now, we're about, at this point, 6 years removed from the movie Quiz Show that sort of dramatized the game show scandals of the 50s in the context of the show 21. Did you have any point of reference for that? Were you familiar with the original show at all when you found out they were doing this new version?
I had seen the movie, was a big fan of the movie. Um, think I probably saw it in the theater when it came out, and was fairly fascinated by it. Of course, the those days, 94, still the fledgling days of the internet. So I don't think I was able to dig into it to the extent that you might otherwise have in current times. But very aware of that. And but I don't know that I necessarily grasp all of the nuance of the game from the movie until you actually found yourself playing it.
I'm thinking about that early 21st century from about 1999 to maybe 2002, where there was this massive rush of big money, $1 million, multi-million dollar game shows. And I imagine that for that circle of people who love trivia and practice and sort of kept at it and sharpened those skills, it was just such a great time to also know how to audition as a game show contestant. And the only thing I can compare it to, within the last 5 years, there was this explosion of quiz-based apps that, played a quiz game at a certain hour every day, and they were giving away real money. And I just remember seeing so many of the people in our circle, and I say our circle in terms of, the people who enjoy game shows to that degree or, involved with them, they were winning so much money. And it was just like, as long as you knew where to go, you could play, you could win because you were good enough. And I just imagine that there had to have been that sort of rush back in the early 21st century where there were so many game shows to go on there and they were giving away so much money compared to even, that time 5 years ago.
Yeah, it was really a banner time for folks whose ambitions are to win money on TV, and particularly at that point, folks who wanted to answer questions correctly and win money on TV. But yes, the apps, that was kind of a flash in the pan there too for a couple of years with Confetti, and I forget the names of the other ones, but fun times certainly. Try your hand, and if you get the right stack of questions, like you see on Slumdog Millionaire, right? You get the right stack of questions, and the world is your oyster.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you could write it home. HQ was the big one I remember. It was like every
That's
day
right,
at 9
HQ.
o'clock. I never won a single game of HQ. Did you play HQ at all?
I did play HQ. I won a handful of times, relatively small potatoes, $5, $10 here and there. But it probably added up to a few $100s over the course of time, between that and the confetti and I forget what else.
HQ, there was Confetti. Cash Show, I seem to remember, was one. But I don't know, that one always felt a little janky compared to HQ. I don't know, there were just so many. There were so many. Let's talk about your experience as a contestant on 21. So you went through the audition process, you did the whole thing, and now you're in the studio. You're getting ready to be on the show. Tell me everything you remember about that process, about getting to the studio and just being there and kind of prepping yourself to play this game.
Sure. So, the tryouts that was probably early fall of '99. Um, and it seemed pretty clear that they were interested in me right away. The I and I think that doesn't have so much to do with me as the fact that I could wear a uniform on their program. I mean, that's a hook that game shows have historically been very keen to exploit. And luckily enough, I was active in the military at the time, so um, and not ashamed to use that to my advantage. Um, then come, I want to say, um, I want to say the next major milestone there was probably in the December timeframe when they flew myself and my wife at the time out to interview in California with the coordinators and the producers. And we made a little bit of a trip out of it and saw some sights and had a good time and crossed our fingers and went home. Um, and then when they started in earnest taping, of course, I'm watching the show fairly religiously at that point and recording the show and taking notes and um, doing all I can if I get the chance to be really prepared on not just the type of questions they ask, but the gameplay and how to strategically be ready to do what needs to be done on the show. And then they eventually got to me and said, "We'd like you to come out. Who's your second chance going to be?" After some deliberation, I ended up choosing my father, um, who was great for me, and I knew he knew a lot of things that I would struggle with, older pop culture type things. He was much more consistently someone who read the news than I did. It was a daily ritual with him. Did all sorts of word puzzles and crossword puzzles that I didn't do. So he was a natural choice for me. And they flew us out in, I would say, middle of January the first time. And we sat in the green room all day and didn't play. Then we weren't done, of course. They invited us to come back in another week or so. They were taping a few episodes a day, 3 or 4, I think, in general, and brought us back the next week. And, we found ourselves in Contestants Row on the first taping of that day. So we had our fingers crossed, hoping that the randomizer, that I'm pretty sure wasn't terribly random, would end up picking us before the end of the show.
Yeah, I seem to remember there were various ways that 21 used to pick their contestants. I think at first it was an audience vote, wasn't it? Didn't they give the audience like the opportunity to like pick who they wanted to see play?
That sounds familiar, but I can't remember if they actually did that or not. Um, it's one of those things that I think sounds interesting, but I guess if you screen the six people who have the opportunity to be chosen beforehand, you're okay with whomever they pick. But by the time that I was actually on the show, they certainly were not doing that. Um, it was made by the folks who were running the show who was going to be the next person that was chosen.
Right, right, right. Let's talk for a second about the atmosphere of that studio. I seem to remember that there is a live orchestra that played music for that show. Did they have an orchestra in studio for 21?
They did. Yeah. It was they spared no expense, as we talked about. So uh, you had the orchestra there, you had the models letting you in and out of the booths. Um, uh, the the green room was well stocked. And in general, a it was very there was a good level of camaraderie in the green room. People got to know each other, talk, and um, everyone was cordial and genuinely, rooting for each other, particularly if you weren't playing against them.
Well, that's great, especially for a show like 21, which I think to an outsider could look like a very sort of cold and imposing environment. And we should probably explain a little bit about 21, just in case anyone doesn't remember. It's two players facing against each other in a general knowledge sort of competition. You get a category, you take a question that's worth anywhere from 1 to 11 points. You have to get as close to 21 as you can, but you also are not aware of the other player's score. So you're sort of playing to get as close to that score while also in the back of your mind kind of being aware of how well they might do. And there are opportunities, to stop the game at various points. And you're in an isolation booth, and so you can't see or hear much of anything when you're not in play, when you're not answering a question. Is it as isolating as TV makes the isolation booth look or sound?
Sure. Yeah. The variable isolation booth. I don't know, was 21 the first one in the 50s it's a cliche these days of an isolation booth. I don't know if that was the first instance of that in a game sense or not, but
I don't know if it was the first. I think the $64,000 question definitely popularized it.
Great.
I think and they may have been the first. I don't know if there was a need for that kind of thing even before like the big money shows came out, but they were among the first for sure.
Right. In terms of the isolation booth being isolating, you can they had this almost like a Mylar film in front of you, such that you could see out, but not very far, and people could see you inside of it. But one of the things they did to make sure was, one, when it wasn't your turn to answer questions, you had to step backwards. So that like cut down on your ability to see further, and also changed the angles at which you could see, such that there wasn't as much chance that you could see what was going on. They also discouraged and really disallowed certain colors of clothing. And I can't remember if it was light, dark, or both that you couldn't wear, which limited what I could wear. I think it must have been both, because I could have worn my dress whites or I could have worn my dress blues, but I think both of those were bad, either from the isolation booth or from the camera perspective, or possibly both. So I ended up having to wear what was more of a working uniform, that the khaki working uniform that military officers wear. And then from the sound perspective, you've got headphones on, and when they open up the mic so you can hear, they're porting in sound of audience, so you can't tell whether it's real audience clapping or it's they're piped in, or a mix of both. So you're unaware of what's going on with your contestant and how your competitor, and how they're doing on their questions.
How disorienting was that for you as somebody who's looking to focus on the game at hand? I mean, clearly it didn't do too much to throw you off your game. You did reasonably well, to say the least. But at first, how long did it take you to get used to that dynamic?
So, Christian, I spent the better part of 3 years going to a submarine every day. That kind of thing really didn't have much impact on me. I think I settled in almost immediately and merely focused on the game. I'll share a quick anecdote with you about something that happened during my first game. During my first game, I forget exactly where in the game this happened, but they started to ask me a question. Within the isolation booth, there's a screen where you can see what they're saying, and they started to ask me this question, and then the screen went out. And so they stopped taping, and I'm sitting there going, please don't throw out this question, because I absolutely know the answer. So they do whatever they're going to do. They come back. My screen still doesn't come back on. But they ask me the question, I answer it. It was a question about what film won Best Picture in '96, what '96 film won Best Picture, and I'm sitting there on The English Patient, and that clip ended up on the show. I ended up winning that game, and stayed focused really throughout my run on just playing my game to the best that I could, and the distractions didn't seem to phase me a whole lot.
Wonderful. So your history with the Navy really prepared you for this type of experience. It kind of sharpens your focus and your discipline, and I'm sure all kinds of personal attributes that come into play when you're playing a game under pressure for money.
Yeah, and it extends beyond, of course, the world of game shows. When I started working in the corporate world, I got the reputation of being calm when those around me were not calm. And I would often share with my teams, there's no such thing as an emergency in general in a corporate environment. No one's going to die. I've found myself in plenty of situations where if I wasn't careful and did the wrong thing in the military, that I could kill hundreds of people by, not maintaining the proper level of oxygen in the submarine, and all myself and all my shipmates would have died. So, stress has a different meaning when you've been through things like that.
This is off track from what we're talking about in terms of game shows, but as somebody who is always looking for ways to remain calm, it fascinates me. After the military, post-military career, is your sense of calm something that you find you need to sharpen or maintain as a skill, or is that something that's pretty well set in your character once you're done with the Navy, once you're out of the military?
Sure. From what I remember, I wasn't overly anxious even prior to the military. And it's certainly at this point in my life more or less second nature. It's not something that I have to think a whole lot about in general. It's just a mindset and the way I carry myself today that I'm sure is greatly enhanced by my military experience, having gone through, boot camp and very rigorous training, and then, having experiences like at one point I was on watch in the engineering spaces on my submarines for an actual fire, not just a drill. So all the training that you'd have prepares you for those kind of things. But I will tell you, when there was an actual fire, yeah, my hands were shaking, but we did the things that needed to be done, and it was a relatively minor fire, but it felt very real as it was happening. This is something of a guess, an educated guess. I'm going to guess A.
A, copper?
Yes.
I'm sorry, David. The answer is B, iron. Dana, you're our new champion. Nobody ever has done what you just did. You have to be very proud of yourself. You have to be proud of your father. If you can stay right here, Dana. Of course. We've got lots of counting to do.
I know.
All right?
I'm looking forward to seeing
And I hope, come on, why don't you come on right down here? And I hope Dad comes out. Can we bring Dad out? Because I think he deserves it. Let's just bring Dad out here. Where is he? Congratulations. Come on over here. I mean, we don't have a bag big enough. But you've got $1,765,000 here. You should be proud of each other.
Amazing.
Huh?
That's amazing.
You look stunned.
That's good board for it.
Okay. And you look, I hate to say this, relieved.
A little.
Okay. I know you would like to have won that other million.
Right.
But be proud of what you've done. They've been terrific, haven't they?
Yeah.
And we'll be right back. Because our new champion
Let's
will
talk
play
a bit
perfect 21
about
right
your
after this.
performance on 21. So in the year or so that the show was on the air, and it bounced around to various time slots before it kind of went away, you were the largest winner in the history of that particular run of the show. $1.765 million won over 6 games, which if you look at that number in retrospect, the amount of money that these shows were giving away per game in that race to get ratings and to get those shares is just unbelievable. To win half a dozen games and have it come away with that much money. Tell me about the attention that you got as a result of those wins. I mean, for a little over a year, you were the world record holder in terms of winnings on a game show. If not the world, at least in the United States. What did that do for your life coming away from 21? I mean, you mentioned it was a whirlwind. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. And just a little perspective, some context there. While we had $1 million winners from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, it had been maybe a month since the first winner outside of Millionaire happened, and that was on 21. Raheem Oberholzer had won. I think at that point it only took him 4 games to get to $1 million. And then shortly thereafter, Greed had Curtis Warren on the show, and he won 1.4 million or thereabouts. And then just a week later is when my final show aired, and I exceeded that. So it had that feel at the time that, oh, this is just going to keep getting broken and broken and broken in rapid succession. But then it kind of stopped. Mine happened, and as you say, I was the leader for just over a year until Millionaire caught up with their escalation in their prize. But in terms of attention, you know, it was as you say, your 15 minutes of fame, and it was very much a whirlwind. You know, it started with I want to say it was Access Hollywood was at the viewing party for my final show, taping what was going on. I appeared on Extra. I appeared on Oprah, along with Curtis Warren on a show about folks who had come into a windfall situation. Maury talked about me with Larry King on his show. All sorts of things that you know you can't comprehend until you've been through it. For a good month, more or less every morning, my phone would ring sometime before 8 a.m. and I'd be talking to some radio host somewhere across the country on their drive time show, and they'd be asking me questions, and it'd be a fun little segment. And it was a time when I'm not necessarily a morning person, but I would wake up, you know, with a little extra vim and vigor every morning, at just the awe of it all, the good fortune that I've been blessed with.
Sure. Exciting, but exhausting, I imagine.
I'm sure it would get old if it lasted for much longer than what it did. It never really got old in that sense for me, because you know, even in the game show world, if you're this side of the big Jeopardy contestants, fame is pretty fleeting.
Your father played a very significant role in your time on 21. You mentioned the second chance aspect of the game, and I don't think we went into too much detail, but again, in the wake of Millionaire, a lot of shows gave their version of lifelines or helps or things that made the game look a bit easier or the prize more attainable. So other than having 3 chances to give an incorrect answer, they had like a 3 strikes rule. You also had your second chance. If you needed help with a question, you had someone backstage that hopefully would be able to help you answer it. And yours was your father. That it must have felt wonderful to have him so close to you during what is a life-changing experience.
In some of the story is not well known. So as this is happening and we're getting ready to prepare to go to California for I think the first time. I think this happened before the first trip out there to sit in the green room. I think my dad was coming home from work, and I think he was kind of daydreaming about being on a game show from what he said. And he kind of lost focus on what he was doing and got into a very serious car accident. Luckily he had some bumps and bruises, and while he was on the show, the escorts, the models who were escorting him from backstage where he was were helping him along because he was a little unsteady and a little sore from that escapade. But I was very fortunate to have him there. It was part of our strategy that I knew things that he would know better than I would. And anytime when I had a question where I still had him available to use, I tended to go, for one extra point than I might go on my own, knowing that I had a second chance who was very strong and that I wasn't afraid to use. So from that aspect, I called on him in the 6 games I won, and he gave me a correct answer 6 times. Also, during my entire run, to tell you how fortunate I was, 21, for those who haven't seen it, missing questions, even one, is a potential death knell. All 7 of my contestants missed one of the first 2 questions. And as you know, Christian, after the second question, that's when you're given the chance to stop the game. So I think in any of those 7 games, I could have safely stopped the game and won because of that. Even in the games when I happened to also miss a question, even in the game when I was playing for another $1 million and missed a question with the only question my dad missed, I was still up 8-7 at that point. And if I'd asked Maury to stop the game, that record would have been a lot bigger.
The show worked in a lot of ways that were different from the original. If I remember correctly, the original version, if you won a game and decided to play, so first of all, you had the option to go home with whatever you won up to that point. If you decided to continue and play against someone else and you lost, whatever that person won would come out of what you've already won. There was like there was like a gamble at any juncture in the original part of the game. And again, something that 21 didn't do, but you also had your perfect 21 bonus round. So in between each game that you won, you had a chance to win another $210,000 in the bonus round.
That's right. And yes, didn't have that risk aspect. I don't remember exactly how it worked in the original game, even though I've since seen videos of particularly the famous match between Herb Stempel and Charles Van Doren. But yes, you weren't risking anything you'd already won, which made it nice, made it a much easier decision, of course. But yeah, the perfect 21 round, um, was an interesting round because of the way it was structured. It tended to um, not encourage risk taking because each time you were answering a new question, you were risking the money that you had already banked on your earlier questions in that round. So um, I think the most I ever got was 4 out of the 6 questions there. I did try to extend it, you know, later in my run when I was starting to feel a little bit cocky, and stumbled on I want to say it was a French cooking question. I also stumbled in a 20 perfect 21 round on the military. Um, True or false questions, if worded uh, if worded in a certain way, can sometimes be tricky, and sometimes you just don't know. But was a fun interlude in between head-to-head matches, I suppose.
Sure. You're out of the isolation booth for those rounds too, which I wonder if that's a preferable environment to being inside with headphones on.
Right. Yeah. You get to experience more of the crowd and whatnot with that. So um, overall, the whole experience of taping 21 was phenomenal. The people don't know, but we came to the we came to the studio that I want to say Saturday morning as hoping to get on the show. Um, I got on the I was the last contestant uh on my first foray into the front row where they were picking the contestants. I got on really with the smallest amount of time available. They said, we may not be able to play a full game, so if we get to a certain point, we're just going to take who's ever ahead, as long as they played 2 questions. And then both of my other 2 episodes both taped that day. So we went from hopeful contestants to the biggest winners in game show history in the matter of a few hours.
Again, 1.765 million. What were you able to see or do or accomplish as a result of winning this money?
So it's interesting. One thing we immediately did was, I bought my father a new car to replace the one that he had wrecked. Um, did some other nice things for my family, help my sister with her education, things like that. Also spent a month in Europe that summer, um, seeing all sorts of wonderful things. Scandinavia, Copenhagen was wonderful. Paris, um, spent some time in Italy. Uh, was was a fantastic trip. Um, but then, as you do when you have a windfall, you figure out how to invest it. And it was a strange time for the stock market at that point. So, um, as they say, sometimes easy come, easy go. We we didn't completely lose our nest egg, but we lost a sizable chunk of it, being maybe a little bit overly aggressive um, in the stock market. And but it's continued to provide a nice a nice safety net for making life a bit easier over the years.
And when you think about your experience on 21, well, let me ask it this way. How often do you think about or reminisce about your experience on that show? I mean, we're almost a quarter century removed from it at this point. Is it something that you think about very often? And if so, I would hope or imagine it's they're positive memories.
Exclusively positive memories. Um, I never think about it myself, just spontaneously. It always comes up in the context of other folks. So I'll meet somebody new with somebody who knows about my background, and they'll mention it. And I'm relatively coy about it, and willing, if folks press me on it, will encourage them to Google me and say you can find out all about it online. Um, the founder of the firm that I work for, Brett Freevert. He likes to bring it up to folks, and at times have brought up the videos from my various game show appearances to demonstrate what I was able to accomplish back in the day. The most recent time that I can remember thinking a lot about it, my dad has gone through some rough times from a health perspective in the last couple of years, and has had a lot of dementia and confusion. And one of the things that my family did on a day when he was having trouble was they brought up the videos so he could watch and kind of relive what was going on there. And unfortunately, in the last about a month ago, he passed. So we'll always have those memories. But thinking about it a little bit more these days in the context of my father.
Sure. I'm sorry to hear that, Dave.
Time waits for no one.
Yeah.
We have to make the most of the time we have, and I try to live my life that way.
Tell Us About Yourself, Conversations with Game Show Contestants, is hosted, produced, and edited by me, Christian Carrion, from my studio in beautiful downtown Lancaster City, Pennsylvania. Co-executive producer Cory Anotado. Researcher Chuck Donegan. This has been a production of BuzzerBlog, the most popular game show website in the world, in partnership with the National Archives of Game Show History at the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. For more information, visit museumofplay.org. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Christian Carrion. Good night. Tell Us About Yourself is sponsored by bonusround.ca, streaming Canada's classic game shows on demand. Dive into the golden age of television with thousands of episodes of Canadian series that defined an era from anywhere in the world, all for just $1.99 a month. From iconic shows like Let's Make a Deal and Definition to cult classics like Bumper Stumpers and The Mad Dash, bonusround.ca brings you timeless entertainment that's fun, enlightening, and affordable. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, relive the magic of Canadian television history. Subscribe now at bonusround.ca for $1.99 and turn every night into Game Show Night. By Game Show Forensics. Join host Robert McKee and his crack team of forensic game show scientists as they take you on the deepest dives imaginable in a quest to analyze the most detailed minutia of game shows nobody else dares to, or cares to, investigate. Nothing is too whimsical for examination, no semantics too absurd for the research extremists at GameShowForensics.com. Parental discretion is advised. And by The Inn at Leola Village. Nestled in the heart of picturesque Pennsylvania, The Inn at Leola Village is a sanctuary of luxury and relaxation. Indulge in the timeless beauty of their historic suites, each meticulously designed to transport you to a bygone era of elegance and grace. Experience the culinary delights of their award-winning Italian restaurant, where every dish is a masterpiece crafted from the finest local ingredients. From romantic getaways to corporate retreats, The Inn at Leola Village offers a haven for every occasion. Unwind at the spa, stroll through the lush gardens, and let the stress of everyday life melt away. Make your reservation today at theinnatleolavillage.com or call the front desk at area code 717-656-7002. The Inn at Leola Village, an oasis of luxury.